Let's see. Hi, everybody. We have a couple people here. We're going to give it a few minutes. I just wanted to go get it started a little early in case I had any concerns about my ability to go live. So we'll just give this a chance. Oh, Lily's here. Hi, Lily. I am very excited to be bringing you these the last chapter and the epilogue. It was a really good book. I hope you guys liked it. So how's everybody been doing this week? The weather's a little bit nicer today, so maybe when we're done, you guys can get outside a little bit, ride bikes, or I've got this great idea I'm going to share, I don't know, later this week or next week. What is it called? It's called obstacle hopscotch that you can do with some chalk outside, but I have to get that typed out a little bit. I saw it on, I think, Facebook or something. So we'll share that in a couple of days. What else? So you can, let's see, you can ride bikes, you can take walks with your family. Trying to think what else. If you have equipment at your house, you can play with that, play hockey in your driveway, shoot baskets if you have a basket, because the parks are still closed and the playgrounds and things like that. So that makes it kind of hard, but I hope everybody's been able to get outside. Last week wasn't the best week for getting outside, so I hope everybody had a chance to at least find something they could do to enjoy some fresh air. But this week looks a lot better. So, and next week, they just announced they're going to be handing out another schoolwork packet on Monday for the month of May. And we're going to invite families and kids to come, and we're going to have another tailgating. We did it a little bit last time, but I think more staff is going to come and tailgate so they can wave to the families. So we have that coming up on Monday. So, all right, well, it's almost 2 o'clock, so let me get my book ready and get ready to read that. I think I had mentioned before, I used to teach this book when I was a 5th grade teacher. And we, the kids, it's a little bit of a harder book with a lot of vocabulary. The kids could read it themselves in 5th grade, so some another couple of years, or when the public library is open again, you can get out a copy and reread it. It's different if you're listening to it than if you read it. There's a lot more you could get out of it when you read it yourself. All right, here we go. So Tuck Everlasting, the very end, chapter 25. The first week of August was long over, and now, though autumn was still weeks away, there was a feeling that the year had begun its downward arc, that the wheel was turning again, slowly now, but soon to go faster, turning once more in its changeless sweep of change. Winnie, standing at the fence in front of the Touch-Me-Not cottage, could hear the new note in the voices of the birds. Whole clouds of them lifted, chattering into the sky above the wood, and then settled, only to lift again. Across the road, goldenrod was coming into bloom, and an early drying milkweed had opened its rough pod, exposing a host of downy-headed seeds. As she watched, one of these detached itself into a sudden breeze and sailed sedately off, while others leaned from the pod as if to observe its departure. Winnie dropped down cross-legged on the grass. 2 weeks had gone by since the night of the storm, the night of May Tuck's escape, and May had not been found. There was no trace of her at all, or of Tuck, or Miles, or Jessie. Winnie was profoundly grateful for that, but she was also profoundly tired. It had been a trying 2 weeks. For the 100th time, she reviewed it all. How the constable had come into the cell soon after she had settled herself on the cot, how he had let down a shutter over the window to keep out the rain, How then he had stood over her as she hunched under the blanket, her breath heavy, trying to look as large as possible. How finally he had gone away and not come back till morning. But she had not dared to sleep, for fear she would kick off the blanket and give herself away, give the tucks away unwittingly. So she had lain there, pulse thudding, eyes wide open. She would never forget the rattle of the rain on the jailhouse roof, or the smell of wet wood, or the darkness that had saved them all, or how difficult it was not to cough. She had wanted to cough as soon as it occurred to her that she mustn't, and she passed a long hour trying to swallow away the tickle that perversely constricted her throat. And she would never forget the crash outside that made her heart race, that she could not investigate and did not understand till morning, when on the way home she saw that the gallows had blown over in the wind. But oh, it made her tremble still to remember the constable's face when he found her. She had heard first a bustling in the front of the jail, and smelled fresh coffee, and had sat up, stiff with apprehension. Then the inner door opened, the door which she now saw, which separated the office from the pair of cells, and in the light that streamed before him, the constable appeared, carrying a breakfast tray. He was whistling cheerfully. He came up to the barred door of her cell and looked in, and his whistling died on his lips as if it had been run down and needed to be wound up again. But this comical astonishment lasted for a moment only, and then his face flushed red with anger. Winnie had sat on the cot, eyes downcast, feeling very small and very like a criminal. In fact, he was soon shouting that if she were older, he'd have to keep her there, that it was a crime, what she had done. She was an accomplice. She had helped a murderer escape. She was, in fact, a criminal, but too young to be punished by the law. Worse luck, he told her, for she badly needed punishing. She was released then into the custody of her mother and father. And these new words, accomplice and custody, chilled her blood. Over and over they asked her, shocked at first and then wistful. Why had she done such a thing? Why? She was their daughter. They had trusted her. They had tried to bring her up properly and with a true sense of right and wrong. They did not understand. And finally, she had sobbed the only truth there was into her mother's shoulder, the only explanation. The Tucks were her friends. She had done it because, in spite of everything, she loved them. This, of all things, her family understood, and afterward they drew together staunchly around her. It was hard for them in the village, Winnie knew it was, and the knowledge gave her pain. For they were proud, and she had shamed them. Still, this side of the affair was not without its benefits, at least for Winnie. Though she was confined to the yard indefinitely and could go nowhere, not even with her mother or her grandmother, the other children wandered by to look at her, to talk to her through the fence. They were impressed by what she had done. She was a figure of romance to them now, where before she had been too neat, too prissy, almost somehow too clean to be a real friend. Winnie sighed and plucked at the grass around her ankles. School would open soon. It wouldn't be so bad. In fact, she thought, as her spirits lifted, this year it might be rather nice. And then two things happened. First of all, the toad appeared out of the weeds, on her side of the road this time. It bounced out of a cover of old dandelion leaves and landed, plop, just beyond the fence. If she had reached her hand through the bars, she could have touched it. And next, a large brown dog with easy gait and dangling tongue came loping down the road toward them. He stopped opposite the fence and looked at Winnie with a friendly swish of his tail, and then he saw the toad. At once he began to bark, his eyes bright. He pranced up, his hindquarters leaping independently from side to side, nose close to the toad, his voice shrill with enthusiasm. "Don't!" cried Winnie, leaping to her feet and flapping her arms. "Go away, dog! Stop that! Go away! Shoo!" The dog paused. He looked up at Winnie's frantic dancing, and then he looked at the toad, who had pressed down close to the dirt, eyes tight shut. It was too much for him. He began to bark again and reached out a long paw. "Oh!" cried Winnie. "Oh, don't do that! Leave my toad alone!" And before she had time to realize what she was doing, she bent, reached through the bars, and snatched the toad up and away from harm, dropping it on the grass inside the fence. A feeling of revulsion swept through her. While the dog whined, pawing uselessly at the fence, she stood rigid, staring at the toad, wiping her hand again and again on the skirt of her dress. Then she remembered the actual feel of the toad, and the revulsion passed. She knelt and touched the skin of its back. It was rough and soft both at once, and cool. Winnie stood up and looked at the dog. He was waiting outside the fence, his head on one side, peering at her longingly. "It's my toad," Winnie told him, "so you'd better leave it alone." And then, on an impulse, she turned and ran into the cottage, up to her room, to the bureau drawer where she had hidden Jessie's bottle, the bottle of water from the spring. In a moment, she was back again. The toad still squatted where she had dropped it. The dog still waited at the fence. Winnie pulled out the cork from the mouth of the bottle, and kneeling, she poured the precious water very slowly and carefully over the toad. The dog watched this operation, and then, yawning, he was suddenly bored. He turned and loped away, back down the road to the village. Winnie picked up the toad and held it for a long time, without the least disgust, in the palm of her hand. It sat calmly, blinking, and the water glistened on its back. The little bottle was empty now. It lay on the grass at Winnie's feet. But if all of it was true, there was more water in the wood. There was plenty more. Just in case, when she was 17. If she should decide there was more water in the wood. Winnie smiled. Then she stooped and put her hand through the fence and set the toad free. "There," she said. "You're safe. Forever." All right, that is the end of the book. That's the end of all the chapters. And now we have the epilogue, something called an epilogue, which happens many years later. So in this epilogue, I'll give away a little information. We find out that this epilogue takes place in the year 1950. Okay, so the year 1950, it was after World War II, of course, many, many years ago from 2020. And we also find out that it was unclear exactly when this story took place until the epilogue you find out. And so we find out that the actual story itself took place in the year 1880. Okay, in the year 1880. So, so now it is 1950. So let's see, a lot of years have passed, and here's the epilogue of Tuck Everlasting. The sign said, "Welcome to Tree Gap," but it was hard to believe that this was really Tree Gap. The main street hadn't changed so very much. But there were many other streets now, crossing the main street. The road itself was black-topped. There was a white line painted down its center. May and Tuck, on the seat of a clattering wooden wagon, bumped slowly into Tree Gap behind the fat old horse. They had seen continuous change and were accustomed to it, but here it seemed shocking and sad. "Look," said Tuck. "Look, May. Ain't that where the wood used to be? It's gone. Not a stick or a stump left. And her cottage, that's gone too." It was very hard to recognize anything, but from the little hill, which had once lain outside the village and was now very much a part of it, they thought they could figure things out. "Yes," said May, "that's where it was, I do believe. Of course, it's been so long since we was here, I can't tell for certain." There was a gas station there now. A young man in greasy coveralls was polishing the windshield of a wide and rusty Hudson automobile. As May and Tuck rolled past, the young man grinned and said to the driver of the Hudson, who lounged at the wheel, "Looky there, in from the country for a big time." And they chuckled together. May and Tuck clattered on into the village proper, past a mixture of houses which soon gave way to shops and other places of business. A hot dog stand, a dry cleaner, a pharmacy, a 5 and 10, another gas station, a tall white frame building with a pleasant veranda, the Tree Gap Hotel, family dining, easy rates, the post office, and beyond that, the jailhouse, but a larger jailhouse now, painted brown with an office for the county clerk. A black and white police car was parked in front, with a red glass searchlight on its roof and a radio antenna, like a buggy whip, fastened to the windshield. May glanced at the jailhouse, but looked away quickly. "See beyond there?" she said, pointing. "That diner? Let's stop there and get a cup of coffee, all right?" "All right," said Tuck. "Maybe they'll know something." Inside, the diner gleamed with chrome and smelled like linoleum and ketchup. May and Tuck took seats on rumbling swivel stools at the long counter. The counterman emerged from the kitchen at the rear and sized them up expertly. They looked all right. A little queer, maybe, their clothes especially, but honest. He slapped a cardboard menu down in front of them and leaned on the foaming orangeade cooler. "You folks from off?" he asked. "Yep," said Tuck, "just passing through." "Sure," said the counterman. "Say," said Tuck cautiously, fingering the menu, "didn't there used to be a Wood once down the other side of town?" "Sure," said the counterman. "Had a big electrical storm, though. About 3 years now, or thereabouts. Big tree got hit by lightning, split right down the middle. Caught fire and everything. Tore up the ground, too. Had to bulldoze her all out." "Oh," said Tuck. He and May exchanged glances. "Coffee, please," said May. "Black, for both of us." "Sure," said the counterman. He took the menu away, poured coffee into thick pottery mugs, and leaned again on the orangeade cooler. "Used to be a freshwater spring in that wood," said Tuck boldly, sipping his coffee. "Don't know nothing about that," said the counterman. "Had to bulldoze her all out, like I say." "Oh," said Tuck. Afterward, while May was shopping for supplies, Tuck went back through the town on foot, back the way they had come, out to the little hill. There were houses there now, and a feed and grain store, but on the far side of the hill, inside a rambling iron fence, was a cemetery. Tuck's heart quickened. He had noticed the cemetery on the way in. May had seen it too. They had not spoken about it, but both knew it might hold other answers. Tuck straightened his old jacket. He passed through an archway of wrought iron curlicues and paused, squinting at the weedy row of gravestones. And then, far over to the right, he saw a tall monument, once no doubt imposing, but now tipped sideways slightly. On it was carved one name, Foster. Slowly, Tuck turned his footsteps toward the monument and saw as he approached that there were other, smaller markers all around it, a family plot. And then his throat closed, for it was there. He had wanted it to be there, but now that he saw it, he was overcome with sadness. He knelt and read the inscription. "In loving memory, Winifred Foster Jackson, dear wife, dear mother, 1870 to 1948. So," said Tuck to himself, 2 years. She's been gone 2 years. He stood up and looked around, embarrassed, trying to clear the lump from his throat. But there was no one to see him. The cemetery was very quiet. In the branches of a willow behind him, a red-winged blackbird chirped. Tuck wiped his eyes hastily. Then he straightened his jacket again and drew up his hand in a brief salute. "Good girl," he said aloud. And then he turned and left the cemetery, walking quickly. Later, as he and May rolled out of Tree Gap, May said softly, without looking at him, "She's gone?" Tuck nodded. "She's gone," he answered. There was a long moment of silence between them, and then May said, "Poor Jessie." "He knowed it, though," said Tuck. "At least he knowed she wasn't coming. We all knowed that some long time ago." "Just the same," said May. She sighed. And then she sat up a little straighter. "Well, where to now, Tuck? No need to come back here no more." "That's so," said Tuck. "Let's just head on out this way. We'll locate something." "All right," said May. And then she put a hand on his arm and pointed. "Look out for that toad." Tuck had seen it too. He reined in the horse and climbed down from the wagon. The toad was squatting in the middle of the road, quite unconcerned. In the other lane, a pickup truck rattled by, and against the breeze it made, the toad shut its eyes tightly, but it did not move. Tuck waited till the truck had passed, and then he picked up the toad and carried it to the weeds along the road's edge. "Dern fool thing must think it's going to live forever," he said to May. And soon they were rolling on again, leaving Tree Gap behind, and as they went, the tinkling little melody of a music box drifted out behind them and was lost at last far down the road. The end. Okay, so that is the end. Sad but happy. So you could tell from the epilogue that Winnie did not go and get more water. She did not drink the water when she was 17. She lived a long life, a happy life. She said, "Dear wife, dear mother," so she had a family, but did not drink the water. And the timing is interesting because the man in the diner said it was about 3 years ago that there was that big storm, and they had to bulldoze it all out. And then Winnie had died 2 years previous to that. So at least she died with the knowledge that the spring was gone. It was all dug up and paved over and things like that. So that is the end of our book. All right. So, if you're interested, here's a really good assignment. A couple of options if you like to write. I think I might have used this question a couple of weeks ago, but definitely at the end of the book here. How did Winnie change? Like from the beginning when she's sitting behind the fence, towards the very beginning when we first meet her, towards that last chapter where she's sitting behind the fence. She's a different person. It's the space of what, a week? Well, a couple weeks, because that last chapter there was 2 weeks after she helped May escape. But so that's, you could write a paragraph about that. How does Winnie change? Try to remember any details or facts about it. Or one of my favorites, why didn't Winnie drink the water? Why didn't she? It's a fun one to write, try to put yourself in her shoes. This book also has a lot of really cool themes. Life and death is a big, huge theme in this book. Love, friendship, good themes to write about. If you're interested and you love to write, you can write that in your journal or write a little paragraph or something. So also, there's 2 movies for this book. Okay, now when I was a teacher, so I started teaching in 1984. Let's see, 94. I think my last year of teaching was 1999. So the movie that was done, and for you guys, it's an old movie. It was made in 2002, but that movie wasn't out when I was teaching. So I never used that movie when I was teaching this book. But there was a movie in 1981, and it was actually made in Western New York. And it's not a great quality. It's, it was a movie. It wasn't just like somebody made a home movie or something, but it's pretty close to it's very, very close to the spirit of this book. So tomorrow I'm going to share that link. I found it on YouTube. Again, it's even now, like, it's not a great quality. And then the other movie, the 2002 movie, I've never actually watched it because I love this book so much and I love the old movie. I could never bring myself to watch it, but so I don't know if it's appropriate. Moms and dads, you can kind of check that out if you can get your hands on that movie. But so that, that's also fun to watch a movie and then compare it how they always make changes. So if you watch one of these movies, definitely prepare yourself for that. Nothing's exactly the same, but it's, the old one, the 1981 is just it's such a good book, or I'm sorry, it's such a good movie, and it's got really good music too. So, all right, my friends, that is it. Thank you for joining me, and I'm going to post this on my YouTube channel. So if people weren't available at 2:00 to join us, they can hear the last 2 chapters. And thank you very much for joining me and for enjoying this book as much as I did. And I hope you all have a great day.